Well, thank you for coming along to the talk today, the last of the Parallel Beats talks. So we're going to be looking at inclusion as a new metric of success. So first off, I'll go into a little bit more about inclusion. There's been lots of talks about inclusion, but this will be an experiential look at inclusion. And then this sort of slightly technical sounding thing about a metric for success, but hopefully you'll go away fully understanding what I mean by that and some, ideas and thoughts to go away with on it. So in terms of inclusion, so as you can see, I'm sat here in this wheelchair. It's because I've got a disability called spinal muscular atrophy, and that's been since birth. I've always had to use my wheelchair to get around. I always had to have full-time care support, and obviously accessible housing, accessible transport, so that's sort of everything that underpins my life today to be an independent person. But of course, growing up, it doesn't all happen that quickly and that simply. There's certainly a psychological side of worrying about how to become independent and how the world may or may not be as open to my own personal dreams and wishes. But obviously the logistical sides. I mean, there's been loads of horror stories over the years of trying to get onto trains and buses and taxis, and even when they have a ramp, and of course many don't actually have ramps in the first place, but when they do, there's still attitudinal barriers. And I think those that know about the social model of disability, I tend to break all of this down quite simply, that the environment can disable, attitudes can disable, and organisational processes can disable. So all of my sort of trying to become this independent person and go on to do the things that you're kind to mention in my nice introduction was all about how to overcome those barriers, really. And for me, that is inclusion, that the minute those barriers fall down, but also the minute disabled people have that encouragement to dream big and to have the staying power and the determination to live their own dreams. And I think I was talking earlier on in another interview about the way that the Paralympics had such a big effect on disability, particularly in Britain, but I think all over the world. And really, I think that what that did, it just showed what can be possible. But then it's not that everyone has to be a Paralympian. It's that we all have our own individual dreams and challenges. And I think that's what Parallel London has been all about, for me at least, looking around today, is that everyone had their own Paralympics today. And I think that's really, really a nice thing about what I've seen, all the smiling faces and the achievement today. So really, I feel overall that's kind of what makes inclusion. So when I was looking at this kind of thing about metric for success, I'm a bit of a personal development junkie. I subscribe to all sorts of blogs and I read all other authors not in the disability space. One of the authors that really grabbed me was Noah Harari, who wrote Homo Sapiens. I don't know if anyone's read the book called Homo Sapiens. So basically, to cut a very long book short, it's all about how stories are what underpin the evolution of human beings. So this is not about disability. This is just about the way that mankind has used stories to be able to evolve to the world we have today. If you think that we can fly to the other side of the world, we've put man on the moon, we've got this thing called the internet where we can log in and get an answer from a little device we call the smartphone. And that evolution to this point, in this book, it's all about how stories have made that possible. But then there's this other part in his second book called Homo Deus, where he talks about the three human sort of threats to human life were always around hunger, around war, and around famine. And there's this kind of paradox now that we're in a time where those three things are not actually as threatening. And he quotes in the book, this is from him and not my own sort of research and fact, that in this day and age, people are more likely to die from obesity than from starvation, more likely to die from suicide than war, and more likely to die from old age than from sort of plague or disease. So we're in this sort of really weird world now where we've evolved and we've got all the technology and all these amazing progress, but there's these paradoxes that things are still difficult in general around why do we have the sort of mental health difficulties a lot of people have. And a lot of people, I think, would say that comes from the pressures to be successful. And there has been, I've certainly seen it in my world, my family and friends, that we're all driven to, get more qualifications and to earn more money, get promotion at work, all these pressures to just succeed, and we get so stressed and caught up in that. And I think that in the end we just have to pause a little bit and take a look at, is this sort of success model the only way? And it doesn't mean we go from one extreme to the other and we don't, get qualifications, we don't earn money, we don't have material goods. Of course we do all those things, but maybe we just start to look a bit more about the people that are around us and have a bit more compassion and empathy for them. And I really feel that those two, what you could argue are quite separate areas, the inclusion area and then this sort of success, potential problem of success. But maybe that all combines together in the end. And so I think for me, if we could really have a world that includes everybody and beyond disability, it's, if you look at the problems of refugees and all the other social issues we see on the news every day, that maybe individuals would start to measure themselves more by how they've been inclusive and loving and compassionate as much as how much money and materialism they've earned. And I think that's how it should be for countries and societies as well. And really coming back to that point about stories, we understand why it's good to have nations and companies, and that's where we get politics and sort of business from, and that's been part of how we've driven to where we are today. But yeah, I just think overall there's a lot of looking at these sort of dividing lines that have been man-made, and you look from the Earth, from up above in a satellite, all those national borders and cities, that they're not real, they're just the stories that we've all told each other. So in the end, I think it's about telling a newer story, a fresher story, and I think for me that's what being involved in something like Parallel London today does, is that we start to change the story and we start to say that we can all achieve in our own ways and be successful in our own ways, but we can be much more than that by being loving and compassionate to everybody else. So that was the thoughts I wanted to share with you today, but I'd love to take any questions from the audience and any other questions in general. Thank you.
So can we have a big round of applause for Martyn? It was a very inspirational talk. So first we'll just go to the crowd. Is there any questions? We have one there. I'll come over with the microphone.
I didn't hear all of it.
So the question is, how accessible are trains and ramps in London in terms of moving forward into the future? Let's say right now you have to pre-prepare your journey, don't you? You have to let them know that you're going on this train or this ramp. Do you think there'll be like a future where you wouldn't have to do that? Do you think technology can help with that maybe?
Yeah, I think overall we've seen a lot of good progress in that area. When I was at university in sort of 2002 to 2006, and before I was able to drive an adapted car, I had to take the train everywhere. And there were so many times that I had to wait longer for the person to come with the ramp. And there were times that when I got to the other station, the ramp wasn't ready and then the doors closed, and my friend I was with sort of went and gone to go get help, and I was then off on the track all on my own, and it added like another hour to my journey. So there was a lot of horror stories like that 10 years ago, and I think that there are far less incidents like that. So in the end, the process is that you're meant to phone 24 hours before and give the destinations and the times. Then the reality is that you might not know what time you're going to want to particularly come back from somewhere, but there is a flexibility. So there's an encouragement to phone 24 hours before. They will get assistance, whether it be the ramps or just other personal assistance. But I think it's got a lot better than it used to be, for sure.
So then in terms of a future, do you think there'll ever be a time where you can just make a split decision, I want to go here now, and you won't have to do all the pre-planning beforehand?
Particularly with trains, potentially, hopefully, yes. But I'd probably point that question more towards that we are going to have autonomous driving cars. And so instead of calling on your app, like an Uber taxi or something like that we have at the moment, that you literally could hail an accessible vehicle and that can take you from A to B without the faff of having to go to a train station. So if we're talking futuristic, I think that's the future of it.
So then in terms of defining a successful trip for yourself, how would you define that in terms of inclusion? Like, what barriers have you faced maybe 10 years ago that you won't face today? What barriers do you think will disappear 10 years in the future?
I mentioned in the talk about psychology, so when I decided I wanted to go abroad, not with my mum and dad, but with care support, sort of on the independent living vibe, I was kind of like, look, this is going to be a challenge, whatever happens, right? So let's just do Australia. Like, it's the other side of the world. Let's just set that challenge. And the barriers there were mostly the fact that I was scared, and that was the biggest barrier that I had to overcome on that first trip. But of course, there were lots of physical barriers, lots of environmental barriers. Like on a plane, you still can't you can't stay in the wheelchair. Okay. So they have to lift me out, and other people's wheelchairs will have to be lifted out. The wheelchairs often get dropped and broken. You feel quite uncomfortable being lifted by strangers. And on a flight to Australia, that's a long way when it's difficult to get up and use the toilet. So, for example, traveling abroad, air travel is still pretty, it's not good. So I think that would be, for me, the future would be trying to work out how you can stay in the wheelchair on the aircraft. And there's campaigns looking at how that could work. Once you've then got to your destination, you said what makes a successful trip. I mean, it's got to be beautiful beaches and cocktails, right? And I think we get hung up on a lot of the disability, impairment, barrier stuff, and of course that all matters. Like, if your impairment means you have tiredness or pain, then you've got to listen to that. And if you've got barriers, you've got to overcome them. But we should be booking holidays, not everyone's a holiday, but whatever we're trying to do, it should be because it's what we want to do as a person, not because it's accessible and we do it just because it's catered for disabled people.
So in terms of all the personal development as self-help books that you've read yourself, what's that one quote that stayed in your mind that keeps you inspired or has always made you happy or made you really want to keep pushing forward?
I'm probably not going to quote it word for word, but it was a sentiment that Steve Jobs said, that the world is made up of people that are no more intelligent than you. And that's why I was talking today about stories, that the minute you become the architect of your life and you become the architect of the world you want to build and influence, then it can be whatever you want it to be. And I know those things can sound at times a little bit cliche, a little bit cheesy, but I've really learned that lately, that when you have a vision in your mind of what you want to do and you just stick to it, you don't give up, you can make that come true every single time. So
then in terms of the Parallel Beats, obviously our goal is to make a social platform where people can share their stories. How important it is for everybody to really tell their story or listen to someone else's story?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot been going on the last couple of years of my job. I started off as a blogger, and it's just grown into, like, I've done media work, and I'm giving talks like here today, and it's been phenomenal, some of the projects I do. But I started out as a blogger, and it was like, I didn't know exactly what blogging was, what Twitter was, all that. We're talking a few years ago. But just by telling my story, the good days, the bad days, the indifferent days, it resonates with people. And you never know, that one tweet, that one video, that one talk you give will always change someone's life, and they'll pass that on later as well. So it's got that chain reaction effect as well.
So when you first started, did you have that confidence to write down your words, or were you apprehensive of how society might judge you? So we already spoke previously to Adam Pearson about how there's the good side of the internet and all the good it can do, but also there's that darker side where people can really be nasty and try and use people as a tool for their own comedic elements.
Yeah, I mean, you get people like that, and I think I've just learned that they're coming from a place that they've got difficulties and they're unhappy for other reasons. So I think early on it affected me. If I got a bad comment or a bad tweet, of course you take that to heart, and I've learned to get a bit of a thicker skin. But in the end, you have to just remember that it's beyond your own self, that I know what I share. It's not about me just talking about me. It's the fact that people benefit from it, and that's what fuels me to keep doing it.
So in terms of our maybe younger listeners, what techniques can you give them to just build their confidence? Pushing them, may not be public speaking, it may not be doing the race, but anything that allows them to express themselves and whatever they want to do in life.
Just try loads of different things and do it local. Don't feel like you've got to go far. Just basically know what you're interested in, and you'll know. Think back to childhood. We all know what we enjoyed doing as kids. I bet you that's still going to be your passion, whatever age you are. And just start trying sports, trying local clubs, and when that thing hits you, you'll know that it's the one you want to carry on with. And then you can go on courses and learn and develop skills and, do all the nuts and bolts. But when you've got passion, then you've got the steam.
And also, as a digital influencer, what do you think the future is for the internet in terms of pushing events like this, or generally helping the disabled community either connect or grow?
Yeah, I think it's important that you get the online stuff's great day to day. You don't have to travel. You can connect with your peers. You can ask questions about disability or about, the overcoming the barriers. So the online world is this hive of solutions, but you still need that face-to-face time. And I just felt it today, I did the 5K with my fiancée Kasia at the back there and some other friends, and we just had a blast and everyone was just smiling. And I think that's such an important thing that you don't always get with the digital world.
So to end on not a high note, but end on the question, how important are events like this for people to come together? So it's not just for disabled people, it's for able-bodied people, it's for everyone to really be inclusive.
Yeah, I often say that I'll know that I've achieved what I want to achieve with my blog when it's not needed, because everyone's got everything. I think it's a bit like that with this kind of event, that there will be a day where every event is inclusive, and that's what we're all hoping for. But it's so important that Parallel London exists, and it's just so key to getting people together, overcoming those psychological barriers, trying out new things, and just kind of pushing the agenda forward. As I said earlier, that I do believe the more the world is evolving, inclusion and compassion are going to be the new ways that we measure how well we're doing as people.
And then finally, for anyone who's at home, who's watching this, who hasn't come today, what piece of statement or advice would you say to them of why they need to come to the next Parallel London? The pressure's on for that one.
Yeah. Well, I think selfishly you'll have a great time, and from the bigger perspective you'll just be becoming part of a bigger movement that's going to keep changing things. So why would you not want to do that?
Cool. So on that note, let's give a big round of applause for Martyn, and we'd like to thank you all for watching. Thanks a lot.